Hello everyone tuned in to the Easy Dreams cult. Today you have Billy Cultist with you, and also today we're gonna get back into the swing of making our jungle, which I started probably like a month ago or so, something like that. And to anybody who's been desperately waiting for me to get back to this jungle, I'd like to say, well, I'm sorry, my apologies. As you probably know if you follow our channel intensely, Jimmy's recently been doing a thing where he's been deeply involved in trying to figure out how to make a RPG turn-based combat system and document the process of creating that for everyone's benefit. And during all that, it's been very difficult for me, yours truly, to sandwich in time for the jungle creation. But we are back today at that, and we're going to make a couple of small trees, I think. And this, I believe, will be one of the final elements I actually have to make before we can actually go ahead and commit to really making the jungle itself in all of its glory compiled. Then, of course, though, the way things are with this RPG series and all the requests we get, even though I think it's only going to take one more video after this, heaven only knows when that's going to actually come around. Also, before we get started, if you're in the crowd that's eagerly awaiting the next installment of Jimmy's turn-based RPG combat thing, I'm telling you now, have no fear, because we're going to continue with that. There's still a lot more that he's got to show, and there's a lot more episodes planned for that series. It's going nowhere, don't worry, it's coming back. Jimmy's got a very full plate, and every once in a while, he needs a little breather, so I can come in with my jungles and my environments or whatever I got. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this thing off by going ahead and bringing in the last tree we created, which is a large jungle tree, which is going to be our mainstay tree. And I'm just going to search through my collection and bring that in for scale purposes real quick. Alright, so I've stamped in our large jungle tree, and as we can see, it's fairly large, at least in relation to the grid. Another cool thing I did to this tree is I made it in like segments. I split it right about here, so far above the jungle floor. So if we enter into the group and we look at it, we've got this top part, and we got this paint on the top, and the leaves, of course. I'll just select all that stuff right now, and I'm going to move that right out of the group just to demonstrate kind of why I did that, and I'll put that over here on the like ground level kind of. And as you can see, we could basically split this massive tree, and we can have two new useful props for our jungle, which is a kind of split off tree, if we want like a tree stump, and a smaller tree essentially. It's not as tall, it's smaller. It works well in that way. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take and make a couple, I think, of smaller trees that are smaller than this section, because this is smaller than this tree when combined. We will make probably, I think, something that's similar to this, except like a sapling form, and then maybe on the other end a kind of a palm, a small palm, because jungles kind of have palms. And these two trees probably aren't going to be too heavily detailed because of the size they're at, and I don't tend to put a lot of detail into things to lower the scale. So I'm just going to leave these two things like they are and then get started sculpting. And we'll just hit square and open our modes, and we'll go right there to sculpt mode and get right into sculpt mode. I'm going to go select the curve tool, and I am going to change it from stamp to smear by holding L1 and pressing triangle. Then I'm going to hit L1 square and get my advanced options, and I like to set varying looseness on. I'm going to turn this down though, the looseness amount for initially. We can reduce detail later. Then I'm going to go ahead and kind of scale this to get kind of a trunk diameter that I like for this small little tree, probably around there, something like that maybe. Pretty small and thin. Then I'm going to just start drawing it up, try to draw myself something of a little trunk going up. Much shorter than the big tree, as you can see. Now I've drawn out this trunk. It's got kind of a nice organic kind of line to it going on, but there's one problem I kind of don't like. I don't like how this is. I drew it straight. It's kind of too straight all the way up. I think up near top where it starts to taper, it needs to go off and branch. So I'm going to left D-pad real quick and undo that draw, and we're just going to draw it again until we get it in a place we like it. Okay, I've drawn it out a couple times, had to reverse it a couple times, wasn't quite satisfied with what I got. Sometimes you got to do that, but I got where I want right now. I like the look of this. I like how this is kind of breaking on going off in a little angle there that looks more natural and tree-like. And the next step to this is going to be making all the little branches coming off. I'm not going to probably make too many of those. Like I said, I tend to avoid over much detail in my stuff. You can get away with that though in Dreams, and in most art actually. Implication is actually more important than just the hardcore detail you put into something. Now something I could do is I could just shrink this down and go about drawing out my branch just freehand, kind of like so. Like so, and just kind of, there you go. We got kind of a nice branch. There's only one problem. It's kind of the same problem we had with this main trunk, but it's more so with the branches. You draw along a plane, unless you change the plane, and that can kind of mess up your freehand in Dreams. So I have a little trick that I use sometimes when I want to have, like, see how this branch from this angle is completely straight? You kind of want more deviation in a branch, like it should kind of maybe go off in this direction or that direction or something, more twists and turns to it. And while it's not really impossible to get that freehand drawing in Dreams, it's somewhat difficult to say the least, so I am going to delete this and we're going to show how I do that. I'm going to exit out of this sculpture, I'm going to go to sculpt mode again, start a new sculpture. And this is going to be viewed as a temporary sculpture. I'm going to open up the stuff. Well, I won't even change that because this is just a temporary sculpture. It's for special tracing purposes, kind of, more or less. I'm going to scale this thing up. Don't worry about any increase this causes to the thermal because I'm going to repeat it again. Temporary sculpture. We're going to delete this later, so it has no bearing on thermal whatsoever. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and get my shapes. I'm going to get my sphere, and I'm going to make sure it's... I'm going to put it on negative. And I'm going to scale it up quite a bit, and I'll just kind of soften that out, because I think I'll just go for a kind of gentle, soft curve in a certain direction. Now, let's do that. I won't do a whole lot of curvies and twists on this particular deal right here. So I'm going to exit this sculpture, and then I'm going to go ahead and get back into my main branch sculpture, and we're going to get back into our curve, turn it back to add mode with triangle, so it's not subtractive. And I'm going to go into guides and hit surface snap so that it'll snap to this thing. And I'm going to shrink it down to branch size, what I want my branches to be like, kind of. And I'm going to kind of just go ahead and... Oops, let's just undo that. I forgot to take it off a stamp and put it on smear. Now we can just kind of draw out a branch along this thing. And if I grab this branch and I pull it away like so, you can see we've now got kind of a curve on all axes. You know, we got curvature from my stroke, and we've got curvature to the side because it was tracking the surface of this crazy thing. And you know, you can go as far as you want with making the surface of that thing more wild or wacky. I just left it a little less so for this. I just decided that was what's best, but you could do whatever you wanted with that. And I think what I'll do is I'll just draw out one more slightly shorter branch, and we will call it... I think that's going to be good. That's going to be enough variation on the branches for me. I'm going to go back out of this sculpt. I'm going to delete this temporary thing, I don't need it anymore. And then we're going to go back in here, get in the sculpt again, and I'm not going to draw out anymore. What I'm just going to do is clone out these curves I've drawn and attach them here and there over the tree to make an assortment of branches, like so. You just hold L1 over it, press R2, clone it out, drag it, move it around, arrange it just as you want it. And it's going to take a while. I'm going to get a number of branches set up, and we're going to speed through that in time-lapse so I can cut down on the gigs this is going to eat up as a video on our poor little hard drive. But yeah, we're just going to go ahead right now and use the magical fast-forward magic. Okay, as you can see, we've come to the end of the road on the branches. At least it's as far as I want to go. You may want to add more or less, depending on your preferences for that and your thermometer constraints or whatever, but I've come to where I like it. We can reduce the detail now on this thing, so I'm going to exit out of sculpt mode real quick here, get into the tools, and enter adjust detail, and as you can see, it's quite red compared to the darker purple of these others. It's costing way more than it needs to. I'm going to reduce it to where it's around the same as those, or a little less. That's fine. And I'm going to pop back out of the detail mode, close this up for a second with square. I think the next thing on the agenda for us in our small tree is to get into it, open it up, and we're going to try to spray paint it real quick. I'm going to get in the colors, I'm going to use color picker, and I am going to get some of the colors from our already existing trees. I'm going to go in my guides real quick and make sure surface snap is not still going to be turned on, because that could cause us some trouble. I'm going to change my brush to a sphere. Gonna make sure it's nice and large. I'll just kind of broadly paint this entire thing. real quick here. There we go. Nice generalized color there. And I'm not really going to do a whole ton of spray painting. I'm going to go back to the color picker real quick and take some of this moss color here and maybe put a little of that around the base kind of. I'm going to go and open my advanced spray paint options with L1 square here real quick. I'm going to turn up the blend amount just a bit so we get a nice gradient going up the chunk. And I'm just going to kind of like boop that on there real quick like that. That's about all I'm going to do with that. Because really this tree, it's low def. I like to work low def, and it's small, so you don't get a lot of wiggle room for doing a lot of spray paint detail on something like that. And you don't really need it. Something you can do if you're working with a lower definition sculpture for optimization purposes and what have you, is to go ahead and just use a painting snapped to the surface to give you, you know, sort of extra implied surface detail. It works a trick. I'm not really going to do a whole lot of that with this particular tree, or these trees in general, because I just don't feel like it's super necessary here. But yeah, you can do that, and it's a good option and an alternative to just trying to make super detailed sculpts with all kinds of, like, intricate, you know, cracks and crevices and stuff actually sculpted into the thing. Also, real quick while I'm out here, I'm going to go ahead and go to coat mode. I'm going to get our finishes. I'm going to go to rough and change this tree to rough. And as far as this sculpt is concerned, I think that's about it for that. What we need to be doing now is adding foliage, and that's going to be in terms of like some, maybe a little trunk moss or something kind of like this in terms of paint. And then up top, we'll just add a little bit less of like what we got on this bigger tree. So we'll start off by getting into sculpt mode and starting a new sculpt. I'm going to go ahead and get my special options, change it to varying looseness. Go ahead and I'm going to kind of make this square a certain shape. I don't know, like kind of a general rectangular sort of thing, I guess. It's not really going to matter in the long run. We're going to reduce the details so much on this. I'm not going to put as many of these on this smaller tree. We're just going to kind of put them here and there. We're going to have room to spare. And I'm just going to kind of time-lapse through the process of me sticking these on here in little areas. Okay, so that's nice and done. We got a nice brick tree there. I'm going to go ahead in my tools and get adjust detail, and I am going to reduce this all the way to hell and back. All the way down. We're going to go right to probably about there. That's where I think it needs to be. And I'm going to hit circle out of that, and we are going to go about coloring it and maybe adding a few style options and coat options. We need to turn it to rough for one thing. I'm going to make sure that's done. And then what we got to do is we got to get into style mode. I'm going to do a little with the looseness and the impasto, just a bit. Loosen it up just a touch, and I will impasto that out just a touch. I kind of like to do that. It's not going to show up too well with this square fleck type, so I'm going to get into flex, and we're going to change it. I like to use for trees oftentimes the dots, although other types can be viable. Change them to dots. It looks a little more like leaves, and that impasto will show up much more. But while I'm doing this loosening and impasto, I will give just a word of warning. I am on a PS5 currently doing this, and my experience using PS5 with a lot of impasto and stuff is it's fine. It doesn't cause a lot of overdraw problems or optimization issues or slow down. If you have a whole ton of impasto in a scene, you can just play it fine on PS5. I haven't had any issue with that. But having said that, and having experimented and done a lot of work on the PS4 prior to getting a PS5, I will say that if you're on a PS4, this too much impasto and looseness can cause you a lot of problems, especially if it's like a forest where it's loaded down with trees and they're like overlapping. It can cause huge like overdraw problems and such like that. So my warning is, if you're on a PS4 or even a PS4 Pro, you might want to forego extra looseness and impasto on these leaves. It can still look reasonably good, and it'll be more optimal for you. But with that out of the way, I'm going to enter this sculpt, and we're just going to go ahead and spray paint this up real quick. I'm going to color pick from our big tree up top. Just going to make this real big here. I'll get the sphere. The sphere tends to be much better. And we got that nice and painted. Another thing I want to do before we move on is I'm going to enter into the tweak menus, and this is something I like to do. Get into physics. I'm going to, on the leaves, completely uncollidable, turn off imp interaction. We're not going to be using that, and put the physics to low. I'm going to go ahead and get in the tags, and I usually put scenery on stuff that's, well, scenery. And real quick, I'm going to open and do the same options basically on the trunk with one caveat, that being that in physics, it's going to be collidable. We're just going to turn off the imp interaction and the cost is going to be low. But scenery again for that. But I'd say we're basically almost there in terms of this tree's completion. What I'm going to do now is go ahead and start up a painting. And this painting is going to be used for multiple things. I'm going to put, you know, some leaves on the trunk, kind of similar to what we got going on there. Not as many, of course, but a little of that. And I might just flesh out the upper canopy just a bit with some looser, more, you know, see-through leaves or something like that. I'm going to get my color picker and we're going to get ourselves the same color we got on this moss, I guess, here, roughly. And I'm going to make sure for this trunk part we're on surface snap. I'm going to go ahead and get in the finishes and choose rough for these. Actually, wait, I might choose rough wax for these ones here on the trunk. And furthermore, I'm going to make sure I'm in the paint brush flex mode. That's good. And we're going to just start drawing. I'm going to kind of time-lapse through this as I put these up the outside of this little stem trunk we got going on. And now that I would say is some, for my purposes, ideal moss for the trunk. What I'm going to go now and do is go to guides and turn off the surface snap. And I'm going to get to the stamp fleck mode. And I'm going to add basically some stuff up here. I'm going to change the color on this to be like the leaves up top. And I'm going to size this up a bit, like so. And just kind of put here and there a few to kind of give us some kind of, I don't know, gradation out along, and maybe here we got some thin branches sticking out with the little leaves. Just kind of make it look nicer. Not so abrupt with these fluffy ball things. Just a little more kind of artsy-fartsy, I guess, if you will. And I'm going to time-lapse through this process. Okay, I got my painting applied to that tree nicely. I think that works out for me. I'm going to go into coat mode real quick, and up here in the leaves, I'm going to just kind of rough wax, just a touch. Maybe not all the way, like 50% or something, because there's less leaves than we got in our big tree. I want a little bit of like translucency going on there. Okay, so there I think we got our little jungle sapling thing, whatever it is, in a nice position as far as all that goes, and I'm just going to, as all that remains is to join all these things together in holy matrimony, like so. They're all grouped. That's what I need. Now, before I move on to making the palm, I'm going to sculpt one little tiny piece of bric-a-brac that I think is necessary. Whenever you're making a forest, it seems nice to have like a little extra branch sculpt just in case you need it to stick it off for artistic purposes here or there, wherever the player is going to be traversing around. That can kind of imply a little more detail than actually exists definition-wise in the scene. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and scope into this, and I am actually going to duplicate out our main trunk of this small tree, and I am going to get it out of this group by hitting... Wait, we did something wrong there. Just reverse that with left D-pad, and we'll do it again. What I did wrong is I got ahead of myself. I need to clone it first, which we will do now. Clone, and then take the clone out of the group. There we go, and release it. And we got a clone. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to get into the clone sculpt group, and I'm just going to take a couple of these branches like this one here and one of the smaller ones, this one here. I'll take those out. We only use 2 types of branches to make this thing. And I'm just going to delete all of this stuff real quick here. We'll time-lapse through that. Okay, that didn't take very long anyway, but anyway. We're going to bring this over, and just using this as kind of a guideline. This is not necessarily the only way you can use this, but we're going to stick that on there. I'm going to shrink it just a touch to about there. I'll probably raise the detail up a little bit more, because this thing is on detail for a full tree, and since this is going to be a little branch, we could probably raise the detail up. I'm going to go ahead real quick and exit out of this, get the tools, and we can jack the detail up just a bit on that to at least purpley levels, or even, that's enough, roughly, just one more. That'll be, well, no, bring it down a little bit more. Let's see. I like that. I'll take that. So we'll get out of that, and I'm going to get back in and sculpt this thing a little more. Basically, I'm just going to clone out some of these. Oh, well, we can solve that. That's because the spray paint is not applied to the clones. We can solve that in post. No worries. I'm just going to time-lapse through as I make kind of a little more detail to this branch by adding a few more smaller branches here and there. Okay, as I said, we can fix that in post, and I'm going to get my tools, get my spray paint, go for my colors, color picker. Let's get our tree trunk gray there. Let's make sure this is all set. Yep, that's nice and big. Spray it, that's all, just once. Fix the color there, nice. I believe since it's a clone of the main trunk, it's probably got the correct settings, but I'm going to go in and check real quick anyway. Yeah, they're correct there. We got, yeah, okay, everything's fine. Now I'm going to go in paint mode. We're going to start a painting just for this, and we are going to not use any sculpted foliage for this. It's so small. We're going to go ahead and color pick the same color we got for our tree leaves up here. And I am going to make sure that is on rough wax. And real quick, I'm going to time-lapse through the addition of all this, just kind of like we did up there in the upper part of that foliage. Okay, we got that edit on there nicely, and now that I'm looking at it, I think it needs one more thing in terms of style, and actually, I think I forgot to do something like that to this particular foliage on this other tree here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take style mode, get the impasto, we're going to go inside, and I'm going to impasto this out a touch. Not too much, maybe, but just enough. Ah, that's kind of nice, I like that. Okay, and I'm going to exit back out of that, and, well, it took me out of style mode, so I'm going to get back in style mode, get my impasto again, and kind of do the same with this, just to get a little more body. And there we go, get out of style mode, and I'm going to go ahead and group these two together for life. And there we have a little branch that we can use reasonably around our jungle in any position, even on the big tree, on the little tree, doesn't matter, we can use it if we need it for artistic purposes here and there. To imply more detail, I'm going to go ahead and leave that unattached. And we can move on to our palm at this point. So I'm real quick first to lead off with this, get my guides, turn this to precise move just real quick, and I'm going to move this over because I'll work on our palm right in the center of the circle of importance. Now our palm should be interesting. Now to start with, we're going to go ahead and of course get in sculpt mode, and we're going to get our curve out. Thing about palms is, in terms of the trunk, they're much easier, I would say, than these other things, because a palm is much more just smooth and very straight. It doesn't have a lot of bend to it. I mean, it has like an overall curvature sometimes, but not like these things with like this wiggly stuff all the way up kind of. That's more what those types of trees are like, but a palm is easier than that. So I'm going to make sure and get in here. I like, of course, varying looseness, turn down that just a bit. Get this trunk to about a size I think I'm going to want it. And with this, we are not going to smear it. We're actually going to stamp. Because for this palm, of course, I want a much more smooth curvature to the whole thing. So what I'm going to do, actually, we're going to do this inside of special options. L1 square. And when you do that with a curve on stamp, you get this. And what you do is you grab this vector point. And you drag that up. I think my palm will be about so tall. Roughly the sort of same height as the other tree over there. And yeah, kind of move that. It doesn't have to be perfect, it's a tree. But roughly straight-ish. And gonna move in here to these midpoints. And we're just gonna kind of make ourselves a little curve. A little bit off to the side there. Not too much. Actually, yeah, maybe not so curved. Just a little bit. There we go. For a palm. I mean, frankly, you could leave it perfectly straight. I've seen pictures of some of those palms, and they are just straight as an arrow, pretty much. But we're going to have a little curve. I don't know. Artsy-fartsy. And go up here to this, which you can control the thickness and the taper of the whole thing. And we're going to just make it a little taper into a little thinner than it is on the bottom. We didn't quite... A little more than that. Like that. I think that'll be good. And when you're doing this inside special options for a curve, this is very important. Take note, this is easy to forget and it can screw you up and make you have to do the whole thing over again. Do not hit circle, otherwise you will regret it. Go to this stamp button and click it. And then you can hit circle. There you go. You got your trunk of your palm right there, nice and pretty. And we can move on to the next part of it. Now, frankly, for my part, I could get away with just leaving this trunk as smooth as it is right now. I'd be fine with it visually, and it probably would work fine overall in the jungle too. But I am going to add a little extra detail of like some rough things going all the way up the palm. Palms have like these segmented look to them on their trunk, so we're going to try to kind of get that. I'm not going to be too picky about it, but we're going to kind of do that. I'm gonna take this cylinder, as you see. I'm gonna make it like so, shrink it down to around the same diameter, just a little bit more. We're gonna put on blend. Might even turn it to that hard blend. No, we'll just leave it on normal blend. I'll shrink it even more. What the heck? And I'm gonna stamp that out like so. Now that I got that, I'm gonna turn off precise moving my guides, which I actually didn't need on for any of this, but I forgot about it. That's what will happen to you. And I'm gonna grab our cylinder, clone it, and what we're going to do is we're just going to be going up the length of this trunk and kind of adjusting it. Shrink that down, make it so it's just about outside the diameter, and hit your left bumper to generate a bunch of little clones. We got a nice, there you go, like that. And that, basically, I'm just going to kind of be doing that all the way up to the top. I'm going to time-lapse through that because that could take a little while. Okay, we got those nice segmented furrow, whatever you want to call them, all the way up the side of the palm. I'm not a botanist. We're going to go ahead and take a cylinder again. I'll just reset it. I'm going to put a little kind of nubbin thing up top, because palms, I don't know, they kind of have something like that, a little. Just kind of lengthen it out a touch, and then do that. That's about all. Okay, and as a final step to our palm's trunk, I think what we need to do, of course, is spray paint it. It's not an alien planet. This is not a pink trunk palm, although that's interesting. Or a Dr. Zeus world. We're going to go ahead and take spray paint, and I'm going to color pick the trunk of our good little tree here, and I am just going to do one thing to that color and lighten it up quite a bit, because I feel like palms are quite, whenever I see them, they're just so bleached looking in the trunk. So we're going to do that, because I just want to give a little variation to our forest in general. And I think as far as all that goes, really, with the sculpt, that's it for the trunk of the palm. Well, one more thing. I'm going to get in here, take the spray paint, and I am going to darken way down, because I think, yeah, what we're going to do is darken that. I think that's a thing they have with palms. I don't know. We're going to do that, though. I kind of like the look of it. Now that that painting business is done, we're going to go our tools, detail reduction, and optimize this thing. Optimize it down. I think we get away with quite a bit here. Optimize it. Yeah, I don't think it needs to be too intense on the detail with this. Yeah, I think that's good for me. And as a final thing, we're just going to open our tweak settings for this, and we're going to make sure, as usual, well, it will stay collidable for the trunk. We're going to ignore, turn that off, scenery, and done. Nice. Trunk on palm done. And now for the last part of our palm, which is in fact going to be the leaves. And I think for this, I'm actually going to get a little experimental and try an alternative method of making these palm leaves with paint. Now, ordinarily, I wouldn't recommend using paint for palm leaves, or, well, any kind of leaves generally, unless, like, but I think our palm, we're going to have not that many, I don't imagine that many instances of it in our jungle. So I think we could get away with this in this case. If there is going to be a ton of palms, I would not recommend using paint this way. But we're going to try it, and since I think I talked about it in some previous video, I would like to actually demonstrate it. I'm going to go ahead and try to get a good color. Maybe I could just use kind of the color we got going on for our... Let's see here. This right there. I'm going to go ahead and lighten that up just a touch. Let's bring it up into the light just a bit. Just to get some variation. Not all the leaves need to be the same shade of green in this jungle, especially the palm leaves. I'm going to go ahead and go into these tools. I'm going to set it to stamp fleck, because I'm going to try doing this in another way. I'm going to try to make this easy. Stamp one out. And I'm going to grab the paint fleck, cloning it. You can do that. And I'm going to kind of clone out a bunch of them like so. And I'm going to size that up. We want a little bit of scale in the center of our palm curve here, or whatever. Get that like that. And I'm going to clone this one up here, and we are going to do the same thing, except we're going to taper down. So I'm going to shrink that. Taper down into I don't think this is working so well, because we got this this looks kind of gross. I don't really like it. So what I'm going to have to do is maybe try to go for it freehand. So what I'm going to do is restart a painting over again. Okay, so we've gone ahead and started a new painting up, and I got my setting to now draw flecks with the pencil, because I think that's going to work well for what we're going to try to do now. I put a temporary sphere out, as you can see, and I am going to turn on surface snap. And if you watch the beginning of this video, you probably know what I'm going for here. We're going to go ahead and put that as far down the side as we can, right there. And start, well, we're going to have to try several tries at this probably, but I'm going to keep... Yeah. Okay, so we did several tries at it, and I think we got something we can use right here. I'm going to exit out this painting and get rid of this temporary thing real quick for a second. I'm going to get back into the painting, and I am going to turn off surface snap because that's going to be interfering with things. I'm going to grab this. We're going to just align this with our palm stem. That's a little wonky there, but that's not going to be a huge deal. And now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to actually keep duplicating this out a couple times, 3 times. Bring it around like so. We're going to have several leaves coming off. I'm going to time lapse as I do this. And I'm going to go down a layer, and I'm going to shrink it just a touch, and we're going to do kind of another ring of smaller leaves around the bottom. Kind of offset. I'll time-lapse through this as well. Okay, so we've drawn out our palm leaves to a nice degree. I'm going to leave them as is. I don't think we need more because, you know, we're working with paint. We don't want to over-reflect the painting. In fact, I'm probably going to go in and see if I can get away with reducing the detail on the painting just a touch. Which, yeah, I think that's nice. I like to keep it... Yeah, it looks a little blocky there, but it's acceptable to me. It looks fine from a distance, and frankly, these are up above your head pretty much, and backgroundish, so it's gonna look okay. I think I can sacrifice some of that detail. Now, of course, making leaves this way with a painting, like I said this before in a previous video, it has its pros and it has its cons. Now, one of the pros, I'm gonna open up the tweak menu, and we are gonna go into the physics, and we're gonna physicalize it just for a second. And floppiness, not. I'm gonna press play here and see. Get some gravity. You can have gravity affected a little bit. And you can have wind, so that's kind of a neat deal. You can have wind blowing through it, kind of. I'm not sure why that's behaving that way. It seems like only these particular ones are affected by the wind. And these ones seem stiff on this inch. I'm not sure what that's about, but anyway, you can kind of have this floppiness to the painting, and that's kind of cool for leaves. The downside is that you basically get this low detail level where it's a very minimalistic approach to leaves, which minimalism works pretty good. Also, you get the overdraw problems. I'm going to get back in here to this. I think something... Yeah, we got to put the gravity back because our leaves were a little weird there. But I think I'm going to leave it off physicalized for now. I don't know what's going on with those leaves over there, as I said before. But there is one other downside, and that's that paint does not cast a good shadow. And... you know, on a palm, you'd want your palm to be casting shadow, especially on the ground, you know, because palms cast shadows. There is a way, though, I'm going to try that might help us out of that problem. And what that's going to entail is I'm going to go ahead and start a sculpture. Go into sculpt mode real quick. This should be pretty quick and pretty dirty. I'm going to take a curve. I'm going to put it on smear. What the heck? It's not going to matter that much. Put it on varying looseness. That's not even going to matter that much, really. And I'm just going to kind of make it approximately the size of the leaf. And we're just gonna draw out a fake leaf here, like so. And it looks like a big ugly sausage worm thing. Whatever, doesn't matter. We're gonna put that there, and I'm gonna time lapse through this as I kind of go around and hook these, clone these around inside here. It doesn't even perfectly match up with these. You might understand what I'm doing, but we'll time-lapse through this till when I get the whole thing arrayed. Okay, so we've got an ugly-looking sculpt thing there, and I'm going to go into detail mode, and we are going to take this all the way down into the sewers of New York, and it is never going to come back up again in detail terms. We're going to go way, way down. Well, could be a little higher than that, I guess, but that's about it right there. That's enough. It does not need to have detail, because what we're going to do is we're going to open its tweaks, And I'm gonna, first off, I'm gonna go through the usual stuff. Non-collidable, and in here we're gonna do something extra. Imp interaction down, physics cost down. We are gonna take off the visibility. It's invisible. Scenery. And we are gonna make sure that it always casts shadows. So now it's invisible and it's casting shadows. And it's casting shadows on behalf of our non-casting shadows paint. So that's pretty neat. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and get in, and I'm going to make sure we just preview invisibility. Check this off for a second so we can select that thing. Select all of that. Marry it. Turn that back on. Now that's all a nice group, our palm, and we can bring this over here, and yeah, there we go. We got the illusion of the leaves casting shadows. Now it's not perfect, because that ugly looking thing is not perfectly lined up with all those leaves and everything, but it'll do. In a pinch, that'll see, that looks, you can't tell. You look at that and tell me, oh, it's not lined up perfectly, Billy. But there you go. It looks pretty good. That'll work out. Now the downside to that, I guess, is, yeah, you're using an extra sculpt to make the invisible shadow object, but that thing is super cheap. You reduce that detail right out of that thing, all the way down, and stick that on there. And yeah, that's a good way to do, if you want to do paint leaves and still have the shadows, that's a good way to go about it, I would say. Anyway, for this business with our 2 small trees, I think we've done a pretty good job. We got our little sapling, we got our palm, they're looking pretty nice to my eyes. I'm gonna go ahead and delete our big tree here, which doesn't need to be out anymore. And what I'm gonna do is, I'm gonna go ahead and save this. It's gonna be remixable once this video drops. Anybody's free to come and get it. And one thing though I would warn you of, if you stamp these things into a scene when you remix it, it is basically going to be all one group. So you're going to have to go into that big group and pull these things out from it, but they should be within it. They should be grouped accordingly to what they should be, and you can use them that way. But just remember to do that if you get stymied by that. Otherwise, it should be all well and good, should work very well. The next video I make, whenever that's going to be, as I said in the beginning, we will probably, I think, go ahead and start actually putting the full jungle together as a whole. If I think of something between now and then that I actually need to do before we do that, then I guess the next video will be about that. But I don't know when the next jungle video will come up, but I am determined to make a jungle eventually at some point. It may be by 2024 for all I know, but we will do it. But probably our next video most likely is going to be more addition to the series of how to make turn-based combat, and as I understand it, that's a popular subject, so everybody will be pretty happy with that, I hope. Also though, shout out to all the people who have requests pending. A lot of people have put out requests. Just know that we do have this stuff listed. It's in our mind, even though we're busy with all kinds of stuff simultaneously. We are going to get to it at some point. We want to do, there's a viewer, one viewer, for instance, requested how to make a Japanese mega robot, you know, like Ultra Z or, you know, Ultra Q or Ultra Man or one of those anime shows robot. I forget all the names, but, you know, like a mega robot, like would fight against kaiju or something like Pacific Rim kind of. But we'll get to that stuff eventually. It's all on a list. We haven't forgotten about it. And in the meantime, if you want to help us out, if you like this video, definitely leave a like. Definitely subscribe if you're not already. And definitely leave a comment if you have some kind of request, observation, good or bad. It all helps. And also, if you want to make some kind of small or even large monetary contribution to us, there's a way to do that. There's links in our description to both our coffee, where you can just donate a small amount, whatever amount you want, or Art Pal, where you can buy prints of art made by us if you like it. But that's all up to you. I hope this was helpful today in some small way to someone. I hope you had fun. This has been Billy Cultist with the Small Jungle Trees, now saying goodbye.